Hi there, and welcome to Where's the Money Gone, a podcast about football finance, governance, and politics. This time, how far should football go to promoting equality? The Ipswich Town captain, Sam Morsy, created a ruckus after refusing to wear a rainbow armband for games against both Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace on the Premier League's annual Rainbow Laces weekend, which is designed to send the message that football is tolerant and inclusive of the LGBT community. Morsy's club said that they respected the decision of the Egypt international, which was apparently based on his religious beliefs. They also said that they are a fully inclusive club that welcomes everyone. Can you ever be tolerant of intolerance, though, especially if you want to persuade minority groups that they do have a place at your club and in your stadium? My name's Adrian Goldberg, investigative journalist, West Bromwich Albion season ticket holder, joined as usual by Charlie Methven. Charlie is the chief executive of Charlton Athletic, one-time Sunderland director, previously an advisor to both Spurs and Arsenal, and a boyhood Oxford United fan. Charlton are the EFL's Community Club of the Year, and they've just launched a campaign to attract supporters from their very diverse doorstep in their particular corner of southeast London. And we're also joined by Sarah Robinson. Sarah is one of the founder members of Proud Baggies, a West Bromwich Albion LGBT group, a former player as well with Albion's women's team, as well as Birmingham City Ladies, Redditch United, and Kidderminster Harriers. Welcome both. Sarah, forgive us, we always have a yatter about the football first. And Charlie, a 0-0 draw for Charlton, an early start as well, away at Lincoln City. A long way to go for no goals.
Yeah, well, actually, we went on the previous evening on the basis that, given the weather forecast, it wasn't easy to sort of be absolutely sure of travel arrangements on Saturday morning for a 12:30 kickoff, because obviously as a director you really need to be there an hour or two before the game, so that's need to be there by 11. So guaranteeing being in Lincoln from southeast London by 11 o'clock wasn't a goer. So we went up on the Friday evening, had a very nice night in the cathedral city of Lincoln, woke up, went for a very blustery jog, and then down to Sinsel Bank to watch actually reasonably entertaining 0-0 draw. But as the game went on, the conditions got increasingly difficult, particularly as Sinsel Bank is not, unlike the Valley, a sort of quite steep closed stadium. It's quite open, and in the main stand there, where you sit as directors, an Arctic, quite literally in that part of the country, an Arctic wind blows across the flatlands of Lincolnshire straight into your face, and it was a stamina test.
Indeed. Well, as we record this on a Sunday morning, the weather conditions have improved a bit. Sarah and I are both looking forward to seeing the Baggies against the Blades in a nearly top of the table championship clash on a Sunday afternoon. I've got to say, I'm not looking forward to it with too much confidence, but we'll see what happens. Let's talk about what we're here to talk about. And Sarah, I mentioned you're the co-founder of Proud Baggies. Just give me your gut reaction to both Sam Morsy's refusal to wear the rainbow armbands and Ipswich Town's response to that.
I think, personally, I think these days it's a difficult one for everybody, for Sam and for Ipswich and for all the clubs. I've just watched a really short interview with Ruben Amorim talking about Man United players not walking out in the pride jacket and why. And it was really interesting because he was saying we have to be really careful that we're not discriminating and we are being inclusive, but we're including everyone. And with that, he obviously is pointing to religion. It's always been difficult when religion comes up against homophobia, as we know quite well in Birmingham from previous, sort of Anderton Park stuff. So I'm a little bit torn this year because I think all of the attention has been on the people that aren't wearing the armband or have worn it with comments across it like Mark Gahan. So my opinions are a bit different.
Mark Gay, just so people, in case they missed that, scrawled Jesus loves you on his rainbow armband, the meaning of which is open to many interpretations, I would say.
So I'm a bit more torn this year than I've been in the past because I'm inclined to sort of agree with the being inclusive, but that's got to include, somewhere along the line has got to include the religion. And I have this fear now with rainbow laces that we're almost forcing the armband onto people and then walking away and saying, right, please wear this for the next two games. and then it's done and it's over. And there's no conversation, and there's no, this is why we're wearing it, this is what this means. Come and meet some of our fans. And I know that Stonewall do fantastic work everywhere, but it feels to me a little bit like the Rainbow Laces campaign is almost running its course now, because there's not the education and the explanation behind it. Somebody will have said to Sam Morsy, by the way, for 2 games in November, we wear this, and walked away, and he's gone, oh, okay. So that's my fear, that there's a lack of education going with it. I would love everybody to wear rainbow laces. I'd love stadiums to be bedecked. You know, we used to sit in the rainbow stand at the Albion. Complete coincidence, by the way, Charlie. But so that's my feeling of this year, is that I think we need to be really careful that we're not just saying, here's an armband, put it on, and not telling people why.
I'm slightly surprised you're that kind of moderate about it, really, Sarah. Some of me thinks, well, if you are the captain of a football club, you occupy a senior position in the hierarchy of that club. Obviously, you're not a director, you're not the MD or anything like that, but you're part of the public face of the club. And it seems to me that although you are completely entitled to believe what you like, as a captain, you are at some level speaking for the club by your actions and by your words. And that in failing to wear the rainbow armband, Sam Morsy has actually sent out a message that at very best, Ipswich Town as a club are conflicted by this. They say they're welcoming to all, but their captain isn't. Go on.
And I think that's the difficulty in these situations, is that Sam Morsy's obviously got his own thoughts and his own feelings about why he won't wear it. And there is, of course, that issue of him being the role model for the club. He's the captain. He's the person that the young kids are going to look up to, because he's leading the team out. He's the captain. So, yes, it does leave a bit of a sour taste there, that role models are going to go, young kids are going to go, well, if he's not wearing it, why would I wear it? If he's not supporting it, as a 12-year-old, he's thinking, what is it then? Why should I support it? And that, for me, is where the education's got to come in for everybody, in particular Sam Morsy, and in particular Ipswich Town. There's no sanctions for wearing this, by the way. It's not mandatory. There are no Premier League rules that say you must wear a rainbow armband. There's Premier League rules that say you mustn't have religious symbolism anywhere on you. But there's nothing that says you don't have to wear it. So there's no sanction for him. He knows there's not going to be anything coming at him other than from the media and people like us as to why he's not wearing it. So he's kind of covered, really.
And Charlie, as Sarah touched on there, Manchester United player Noussair Mazraoui refused to wear a Pride-themed jacket as well for Manchester United's game against Everton. And so to avoid the appearance of conflict, no Manchester United players wore the Pride jacket, which in a way you can argue sends out its own signal. What do you make of it all?
Well, I think Sarah's response there is, dare I say it, remarkably intelligent, and maybe the result of quite a number of years and decades being in the middle of this cause, because ultimately what matters is what works. And I think once something becomes divisive, it starts to peel away some of the soft support that one's trying to build, because some of the soft support starts to have sympathy with the other side of the debate. And if the more progressive side of the debate starts to look like it's trying to exclude, isolate, cancel let's say in this particular case, Sam Morsy, then you can end up sort of winning the battle but losing the war, I think, if that makes sense. So I think another thing that Sarah said is, which I do really agree with, is that these types of very symbolic moments are, I think, have their place and have their value, but all too often rather take the place of substantive action. And substantive action is what is required, and to really make a difference. And that's having a conversation over a long period of time, at many different levels. And that's actually doing things which make a difference every week as opposed to once a year. I think there are all sorts of causes which get their moment in the sun once a year. But as a club, if we reflect on what the name club means, it's a thing which people can choose to be a part of. and you want as many different people from as many different backgrounds, proclivities, ethnicities to feel like they can become a part of the club, that requires a much more committed medium-term type approach. Now, which I would like to think at Charlton we have the first LGBTQ team that is formally affiliated to the club in Charlton and Victor. We have our own Charlton versus homophobia match day, but the activities around that are very carefully planned. It's not just a few rainbow laces. This is a much, much broader lead up to it, which includes a lot of audio visual content, which includes the Charlton Valiants, which is our LGBTQ plus group, actually having sort of sessions with our normal fans and all this type of stuff. It's much more involved. It's much more medium term than just let's go and wear rainbow laces on one day and claim that we've somehow solved the whole situation. So long way around of saying that, you know, if you're hoping for disagreement with me and Sarah on that response, I definitely am not going to give you it, because I think she's got it absolutely spot on. If I can speak about representation, because you're just talking about the club captain and the manager and this type of stuff, on that I do agree with you, Adrian. Unfortunately, in this particular case, the club captain is a representative of the whole club, as the manager is. And if there is a profound difference between the club's philosophy and the manager or the club captain, then you do need to start to have conversations about the parting of ways. Or at least in this case, maybe the relinquishing of the armband, which is nothing contractual. It's an honour. It's something that's taken on. And by taking it on as a player, you do associate yourself very closely with the club as a whole. Now, if you look, for instance, at a more recent instance of individual player action, when James McLean, the Wrexham player, who obviously has been on the scene a long time, refuses to take part in any kind of English or British sort of national patriotism moment, etc., and separates himself from his team and stands out on a limb and says, I'm not doing that, etc. That is absolutely his right. And I think many people, notwithstanding their misgivings about his Irish nationalism, have respect for his bravery in marking himself out in that way. But I think that would be a much harder thing to do if he was the Wrexham club captain. That would be marking Wrexham itself as having proclivities of those kinds. So in general terms, I think that it's damaging to stop people from being able to express their legitimate views on religious grounds. But in particular terms, if our club captain at Charlton was openly stating views that were at conflict with the club's philosophy as a whole, as chief executive, I would be speaking with him and with the manager and asking whether they thought that it might be best to find a club captain that could associate himself with the values associated with the club.
Yeah, because the danger of the Ipswich situation is that the club appears to be speaking with forked tongue, doesn't it? It says we are inclusive, we are welcoming. So if you are an LGBTQ fan, if you are a young player coming through the ranks of either the men's or the women's team, and you are LGBTQ, the club wants to send out the message that you are welcome. And then the most senior player at the club, by definition, you can argue that the captain is the most senior player, the one officially recognised as the top of the tree at the club, says, I'm not going to wear something that is in solidarity with you. I mean, for my money, I don't see how Ipswich can say that with a straight face, really. I don't see how they can continue to have Morsy as the captain. They then have the issue, of course, of if they decide to take the captaincy away from Morsy, that then potentially becomes a divisive issue within the dressing room, doesn't it? Because there'll be people.
That just depends on how the whole thing is addressed, and that's just a matter of professional leadership. And Ipswich has extremely professional leadership, so I think that's just a matter of how the whole thing's addressed. It's quite straightforward to say simultaneously, we respect you as a person. We respect your right to hold your view. We love having you as part of our club, as part of the inclusivity that Sarah mentioned. We welcome also having, different views as well. It's not just saying that we need to have people who come from different backgrounds, but also people who have different views. It's all part of it. If it's expressed respectfully and done within the law of the land, that's absolutely fine. However, we do have certain club policies, and those club policies do need to be represented by our leadership, and the club captain is a leadership position. So I'm really sorry.
Yeah, well,
Just from where we
then
stand,
they
right?
should have made that clear right at the start when they appointed him captain and said these
Yeah,
are a set of values that you're expected to subscribe to. I want to talk to Sarah
yeah.
as well about Sarah, your experience really as an LGBT fan. I know that Matt Lucas, the author, comedian, talked about getting homophobic abuse. These days, in recent times, at Arsenal, obviously, he's a well-known face, he's a prominent Arsenal supporter, and getting some pretty vile homophobic abuse. What's your experience been over the years of homophobia at football, and how has that changed, if at all, in recent times?
I think it has changed. I mean, I think, at West Brom, much like Charlton, we pride ourselves in our inclusivity and our diversity and the work that Proud Baggies do. I mean, I've been the season ticket holder for many, many more years than I care to remember. I've experienced homophobic language from a supporter sat nearby once in all that time, and that's in the last few years. And on this podcast, I'm not going to mention who our opposition was on that day because that wouldn't be fair. But there was a young lad that stood up and shouted as one of our players had gone down injured. I was sat quite close to the away fans actually in the Richardson suite, and he stood up and shouted, "Get up, you F word." Times have changed because I was not the only person that jumped up and said, "Oh, oh, oh, what are you doing?" And he was sat with his mom. I mean, he was a teenager who was sat with his mom, and his mom went into that. That's not what he meant. And we all went into what did he mean then? And of course, they had no answer. They had absolutely no idea. They had no idea what he meant. They had no idea what he was saying. And again, maybe I am getting a bit more moderate, but I was like, well, he was homophobic and he was thrown out by the stewards as an away fan, especially sitting with home supporters. He had no idea what he'd done. He'd heard somebody say it somewhere and had gone, oh, if somebody goes down injured, this is what we call them. So as a young kid, he can be educated, I would hope, by the football club. If not ours and then his or both. I've experienced very little homophobic abuse at West Brom. I've experienced other abuse. I've heard racism. I mean, it's always called out, to be fair. So I think something like Proud Baggies and also Charlton is Valiant.
Valiant.
And we've done a lot of work with Invictus, Charlton Invicta as well. And actually, we're following your lead now. We now have Proud Baggies FC, which we've taken from Charlton Invicta and the guys there, which we know quite well. I would like to think that we don't have that level of homophobia. I don't hear it where I sit, and I sit in the East Stand. We have a very, very, very good reporting system. You will have a head steward or an operations manager at your seat, and I know this from experience, in 5 minutes if you text the number that comes up on the screen. And I know that from experience. I think it's improved. I worry that at the moment we're slightly going backwards. And I think that's a society thing. I don't think that's just a football thing. I think football is a real sort of microcosm of what's going on in society. So we are hearing more racist language. We're hearing a lot of sexist language. But I certainly think the improvement at West Brom over the last 10 years has been huge. I mean, we've been going for 7 years now. I'd love to think that that's part of what we're doing because we're doing, as Charlie said, we're there constantly. We're there 12 months of the year. We're doing campaigns over and over again. We do February Football versus Homophobia Month, which has, I think, slightly more impact than the Rainbow Laces campaign at the moment.
Totally agree.
And I think it's vital that the supporters, everybody, sees that we're doing that and we're doing it on a monthly basis. There's always something going on at Proud Baggies, the same as at Charlton. So it's, again, I agree with you. It's not just a few laces or a few corner flags for a couple of months in November and then it's gone. I really feel like Rainbow Laces has done a fabulous job. And I hate to say it, but so have Sky in their promotion of it. It's been brilliant. There needs to be more to it now because they've reached a point where it can't go any further unless they want to put something more into it. Sorry, I digress from your original question, but I'm quite happy at West Brom at the moment, knowing that we've done enough. The stewards, we train the stewards, and it's working. It's working. We've got a lot less abuse than ever before.
So I think that I see these campaigns in two stages, right? So the first bit is campaigning against the aggressive, exclusionary thing that is clearly hateful, right? So anti-racism and anti-homophobia, right? So that those are things to do with stewarding, to do with general awareness, and also changes in society, and all this type of stuff. That's the starting point. The next bit, which is much harder, and it's what we're embarking on at the moment with our local diverse communities, is to go beyond that to understand root reasons why people from those backgrounds or sexual orientations might not necessarily feel as likely to want as other parts of the community to come forward and actually attend a live football match. And that is a more complex thing, and that is something built up generationally. It's built up through fear of being in group situations when certain things happen. And to be honest with you, as I get older, I sort of see this even myself as a white middle-aged straight guy. I still start to see this. I was on the train back from Lincoln yesterday, and because we were in the early match, I was quite early, effectively. So as I came back through London, I saw, obviously, on the underground system, large groups of football fans moving around. And, even I felt a little bit kind of threatened by it, if I'm being honest with you. It wasn't particularly pleasant. The way in which these large groups of young men were behaving, I'm being hypocritical here because 30 years ago, probably that was me, was in such a way that I thought, to any other part of society, whether it be somebody who is simply female, or somebody who does come from a background with a sort of different sexual orientation or different gender orientation or a different racial background, whatever it might be, to see a large group of young white guys shouting together in an enclosed space is just quite difficult, right? So what we're starting to find, the other part of how you teed this up, Adrian, is around the move that the announcement we made last week with the Football League, that we are starting a large-scale pilot research project into, in the first instance, why people in our area from ethnically diverse backgrounds do not come to the Valley, because we are in a place like West Brom, which is very diverse. Probably West Brom and Charlton would be the clubs with the most diverse local communities. And some of the sort of early anecdotal evidence that we had when we started this before the EFL got involved and we really started to make it into a much bigger thing was that the problems run really, really deep. And they're not going to be solved by simply stopping active racism or active homophobia. It's going to require a more thoughtful approach that's carried through over a really long, significant timescale if we want our clubs really to represent the fullness of the community. So there was one interview that was done when a black guy who really loves football and plays football and supports both England and Nigeria said to the interviewer, look, I've been to the Valley for various events. I don't have any problem with Charlton. I know Charlton very well, but when it comes to men's first team matches, 15,000 white guys all together shouting doesn't tend to end well for people like me. And this is something built up over a very long period of time, which I think people from the LGBTQ plus community would also maybe associate with, which is that sense of feeling I'm not 100% like them. And if they knew what I was or how I feel or what I think, I might not be welcomed inside their group. And therefore, do I really feel like this is my club? Because a club is something I choose to be associated with. So these things take a lot of effort and a lot of what I would call intentionality, right? It's not good enough to simply say, well, we've got, once a year, kick it out, come along and we do something, or once a year we have our Rainbow Laces Day or whatever it might be. This requires a much more thoughtful approach to what kind of club you want to be. And that, I think, is a more complex question than people give it credit for, right? People think, yeah, of course, once a year, say to everyone that you're not against gay people. Oh, great, fine, fantastic. Once a year, say that you don't like racism. Oh, it's great, fantastic. We've ticked the box. We've done what we... Okay, but actually in 20, 30 years' time, you might wonder why your crowd's not as big as it should be, right? And why it isn't necessarily feeling like it's the youngest crowd around as well, and all these types of things. So whether it be from an ethical viewpoint, whether it be from welcoming a diversity of voice viewpoint, but also as a chief executive, whether it be from a commercial viewpoint, I want our club to represent the whole of its community, with all that entails, and for there to be a broad understanding that when you enter the gates of the Valley, that you do so on the basis that you leave these things at the gate, you leave these things at the door, because you're coming together in the one thing that you do all share, which is you want that team to win, and you want to come together in that desire to win. And that really, for me,
that might include, though, if you've got racists in your crowd, and I think all of these campaigns, even where we're talking about rainbow laces, where it may just be now have become a bit of a box ticking exercise, where you've actually got to be a bit more proactive than simply saying, we support these things. You've actually got to go
100%, yes,
and perhaps challenge people within your existing fan base who might find it uncomfortable to be challenged.
So just before we go back to Sarah on this one, I'm going to be fascinated to hear what she says about that. On that very particular point, right at the start of this season, one of our season ticket holders made a racist post on social media. Didn't say anything racist at the game. It was nothing like that. It was a racist post on social media. This was brought to our attention by stakeholders, let's say, and we were asked the question directly. You tell us that you're this type of club, but people who are members of your club are like this. Which kind of club are you? So it was posed directly to our board by local stakeholders. And by local stakeholders, I mean like local politicians, saying, we want to believe that you are everything that Charlton says it is. But if members of your club behave in this way, how can we really take that seriously? So effectively what happened is it was discussed at board level. It was discussed with our head of diversity. And after consideration, the supporter was banned, was then asked if they wanted to appeal their ban, which ultimately said they did, was then, after a cooling off period, invited to come and present their case before a panel, which was chaired by our vice chairman, Paul Elliott. And then after that, was invited to go on a diversity training course, followed by a further cooling off period, followed by a further panel to assess whether there had been sufficient progress made for that person to be allowed to be part of our club. And unless you are willing to go down these routes, in my view, then the rest of what you're doing is largely box ticking, really, because these messages are heard and felt out there, sensed out there, and are actually much more representative of your club than some statement on the website. Sorry,
go on, Sarah. Go on, Sarah.
No, there's a couple of things there. I mean, what I've found this season is that we're doing a very similar thing now at West Brom, and I think it's new for this season. The guy that's taken over as match day operations manager is very, very good. I think it started last season because we were at Cov away last season, and there were West Brom fans. The irony is, wherever I go, if I do hear abuse, it's generally our own supporters. But I guess that's because I'm sitting with them, so I don't hear further afield. But we reported the four guys in front of us for really blatant homophobic language. And we spoke to them throughout the game and said, look, guys, come on, this isn't right. And I'm quite bold in these situations, and I sort of tried to bargain with them. I said, look, I'll pay for your next beer if you promise not to say that word again. And
Amazing.
And it didn't work. They sort of smugly took the beer and then used the language again. We reported them, and the very next day, their season tickets were suspended because obviously between Albion and Cov, they were able to track the seat. So the first thing was they were suspended their season tickets instantly, no questions, instantly. Then they were written to, your season ticket has been suspended, please don't turn up. They were invited into they were either suspended or invited into the football club to talk to a panel with Howard and his team. And then the club decided, do we give them their season ticket back? Do we think this is going to happen again? I think they thought this is probably going to happen again. and sent them away to do whatever courses that the club had recommended. So we're doing the same thing as what Charlton are doing. For me at West Brom, that feels new. That feels like it's been in the last couple of years. Obviously, I'm not involved in the day-to-day running of the club. I see it as a supporter, but also as a member of a supporters group. And we are very well listened to, all of the supporters group, not just ours, very well listened to and very well, much involved in what the club does. So I think, 7 years ago, before we founded Proud Baggies, I was very much a chuck them out, never let them come back. That's it, they're gone, they're barred. My opinion has changed over the years to thinking, actually, what I find is a lot of people don't realise what they're saying. Some do, you're right. We've got racists, we've got sexists, we've got homophobics. They're all there. There's also a big group of people who are repeating language they've heard somewhere else because it sounds big and clever. Those are the people that we can get to, what a friend of mine calls the movable middle. We can't get to this lot. They're so far gone, there's no point. We have this lot, they're in our camp. We've got this movable middle that we can get to and we can educate. So in that way, we're doing what Charlton are doing. What I found with Proud Baggies FC since we started it is there are a lot of season ticket holders there, but there are an awful lot of people in there, particularly women, who are going to the women's matches instead of the men's. And we spoke to two of them the other day because we're part of her game too as well. And we spoke to a couple of them and said, come to a men's match. They're a couple, a female couple. They're living sort of in the local. Come to a men's match. We'll get you some tickets. You can. No, not interested. Every time I've been, it's been uber aggressive. It's full of men shouting, and football is a very, very aggressive place at the moment. And that's not including any sort of racism, homophobia, or anything like that. It's a very aggressive place. It's a very angry place. And they won't come because of that. They'll go to the women's games, but they won't come near the men's games. So I think I agree with Charlie. There's a lot of work to be done to say to those two, as an example, why won't you come to a game? Okay, this is why. Right, what do we need to do to make your match day experience better and more welcoming? Because there's two potential West Brom season ticket holders there who are in their mid to late 20s who are slipping through the net. So I think there's a lot of work to do. And I'll finally say, because I know we need to end, we've spent an awful lot of time at West Brom saying that we are diverse because we had the 3 degrees. We need to move on from that now. That's
3 degrees,
historic.
by the way, again, a reference that will only be known by West Brom supporters or people over the age of 45. But just so we'll quickly say, got to end soon, Charlie. 3 degrees, Laurie Cunningham, Brendan Batts and Cyril Regis, 3 pioneering black footballers in the late 70s. Yeah, that was a long time ago.
And the sentence I hear most talking to fans around us and in the ground is, well, we can't be racist because we had the 3 degrees. And I think that says it all for me. We have to move forward.
Brilliant stuff, both. Thank you very much indeed for that. And I would say I agree with you, Sarah. I've been to West Bromwich Albion women's games, and it is notably more LGBT friendly from people I've spoken to than men's football. People love the atmosphere. I love the atmosphere at men's football. I love the aggression to a degree, but again, it's aggression that you want to be contained within the stadium and doesn't intimidate people who might even be on your side. Great to hear from you. Thank you. Sarah Robinson from Proud Baggies. Thanks also to Charlie Methven, as always, my regular co-host here on Where's the Money Gone podcast. Thanks to Jed Thomas, who produces episodes with me of the pod, and to Mark Machado for his fantastic work at 11:29 for our socials. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss an episode, or if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, do the same for your podcast. We'll be back again next week, but for now, thank you. We'll see you again soon. Cheers now. Bye-bye.